All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next panel is titled AI's Impact on Pharma and Biotech, Advantages and Challenges. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And I'll hand it over to Faisal, our moderator.
Hello, everyone. I'm Faisal Khan. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the discussion with our STEAM panel. I lead an AI group in Astrazeneca R&D that focuses on drug development throughout the whole drug development lifecycle. And I'm very excited to moderate today's discussion. Let's do a quick round of introductions of the panel before we kick things off. Tatiana, would you like to get us started?
Thank you, Faisal, and it's great to be here. Indeed, I'm looking forward to the conversation. My name is Tatyana Sorokina. I am a Solutions Director for Data Science and AI Group at Novartis. My role is to identify the business opportunities throughout the drug pipeline life cycle and the opportunities, the business opportunities that could be accelerated with the use of AI and data science. And then I collaborate with business stakeholders and local data science teams to turn these ideas into concepts, into product development, all the way to the scale-up stage. So my responsibilities are fairly broad, and they span early drug discovery through drug development, manufacturing, and commercial operations. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tatiana. Rohit, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Faisal. Hi, everyone. I'm Rohit Mahajan. I'm the managing partner at Bigrio, which is bigar.io. We are a consulting company based in Cambridge, in the Boston area. And my personal interest lies at the intersection of AI and healthcare. I think there is a lot of potential in this particular field, and I'm super excited to be here on this panel. At Bigrio, we are developing AI frameworks for accelerating the drug discovery process and hopefully looking at spinning out a startup which would be focusing on AI technology with Dell. Ed, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Ed Downs. I'm excited to be here on this panel. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I work for a company called Sinequa. Sinequa is a intelligent search engine provider for enterprises. I myself have been working in enterprise technology for over 20 years as both a consumer, as a user, and a provider. As a product marketing manager, which is what I do at Sinequa, I work closely with our customer success teams to support applications of our intelligent search technology across multiple industries, including life sciences, which is our largest vertical. In fact, a few of the participants on this panel are existing customers, including our very first pharma customer. So happy to be on and looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. And last but by no means least, Philippe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Faisal. Good morning, good afternoon. I am Philippe Moingeon. I am an immunologist. I work for a pharmaceutical company named Servier with headquarters in France. Basically, my role is to head the ImmunoInflammation department, and thus what we're trying to do is to develop new therapies for autoimmune diseases and other inflammatory conditions. And I've been very interested in artificial intelligence in support of drug development in the last 3 years or so, trying to establish models of those autoimmune diseases and trying as well to make inferences with respect to therapeutic targets of interest, obviously trying to also identify drug candidates, and more recently moving towards, I would say, virtual clinical studies. So I'm very thankful to the organizers for inviting me as part of this panel discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. I'm really excited. We've got quite the powerhouse panel with a lot of different perspectives and insights. So let's dive right in. We'll put our first question up on the screen to just prompt some discussion. And really, as we look in pharma and biotech, AI is receiving a tremendous amount of attention, and not just in our industry, but in many others. But particularly as we look at within pharma and biotech, is this attention warranted? Why or why not? I'd be curious to hear what the panel thinks. Ed, curious what your thoughts are. Is the attention we're getting worth it?
Yes, absolutely. Certainly for the area of expertise that I'm focused on, right, which is intelligent enterprise search solutions, right? We've seen applications of AI, and when we say AI, we actually mean augmented intelligence, right? Because it's all technology to support the human, the knowledge worker doing their job, right? And that's playing a key role in how employees, right, of the life sciences companies, your companies, have been doing their job for many years. The company I work for has been using AI, specifically NLP, natural language processing, and machine learning for 20 years to make finding information and developing insights a lot easier for our customers. In fact, interestingly enough, if you follow Gartner, which I'm sure everybody here does, they produce what's called a hype cycle for AI. If you've probably seen it, and it shows one technology on there entering a phase where expectations are being met by users, right? That they call that the slope of enlightenment, right? And no surprise, right? That technology is intelligent search, or what Gartner calls insight engines. So it's an application or a solution that embeds AI capabilities into the delivery of the platform. So I believe, yes, AI is significant, it's warranted, and it's actually been around for many years, embedded in these technologies like ours. The question is, where does it go next? Which I know we're going to talk about later, but that's my perspective on AI usage.
That's a great perspective, and great to hear from someone who actually works in multiple industries. And you can see those cross connections. Let's come to someone who's exclusively focused within the industry and see if they share your enthusiasm. Tatiana, what do you think?
So I can relate to a lot of what Ed said. I think especially in the natural language understanding, there is a lot of opportunity to leverage AI to sift through a lot of unstructured information that we have. And I think it's a good time too, because for the last, for the last 20 years or so, we've been digitizing a lot of the unstructured information that we have as well, and retrieving information that has been digitized. And then we spent the last 5 to 7 years building capabilities to be able to store this data and being able to process this data in such a way that is, machines, it's not too expensive or too long, that it takes machines to process this unstructured information. And now we're at the point where, because of a lot of the interactions happen digitally too within healthcare, like telemedicine, like patient support services, like clinical virtualization of clinical trials, and decentralization of clinical trials, and even a lot of the work that has been done in the lab, it can also now be digitized and be done digitally. We now have access to a lot of structured and unstructured data that should be analyzed. And the question is, well, are we sophisticated enough? Are we ready enough to be able to glean intelligence from this data? And if from the structured data, we've been doing this for decades, because whether it's big data or small data, you always had statisticians working with structured data sets. especially on the clinical side. Whereas with the unstructured data, it's much harder because a lot of this data is relatively new, and a lot of this data is very hard to process without machines. In fact, impossible, right? Like if you look at the amount of unstructured data we have collectively as an industry, there is no number of people that you can hire that would be able to analyze this data and answer a specific set of questions in a reasonable amount of time. So we are forced to use AI to do this. But the question is, do we have the right technology in place? And I think a lot of companies are pushing the frontier of this work when it comes to AI. And Sinequa is definitely very well positioned to do that in the natural language understanding and specifically in search, which is really going to be an accelerator of a lot of the work that we're doing with unstructured data. So I do think that the push into AI is definitely warranted. The question is, we really need to be strategic about where we invest our resources and how much business impact we expect AI to bring, and being realistic that AI in and of itself, by itself, doesn't solve everyone's problem, which I'm sure all of us here in the panel realize, but it's too easy to kind of get caught up in that expectation or in that unrealistic thinking.
Great insights there. My personal opinion actually is that I think the question is unfair. And what I mean by that is that's the type of question you ask when things are just getting started. Is this worth it? Is this going to turn out okay? Should we be doing this? At this point, I think there's no question. Those of us who work in this space know that AI is having impact across the whole of pharma, in drug development, but also even in other areas like manufacturing, sales and marketing, et cetera, et cetera. This is not even a debate anymore. Actually, the phrase I've heard thrown around is, it's not whether or not AI will replace traditional drug development, but folks who use AI will definitely replace those who don't. So maybe that's a good segue then into where specifically is AI starting to impact the pharmaceutical processes, because there's so many of them. Let's start right at the beginning with drug discovery. How is AI impacting drug discovery itself? Are we seeing any meaningful results, and what are they? Philippe, would you share your thoughts about the drug discovery space?
Sure. First of all, I would agree with you certainly that AI is a revolution in impacting all steps actually in drug discovery and development. If we focus now on drug discovery, what AI is doing for us, it helps generating, and I would say as well, capturing the value of big data, massive and multimodal data as it relates to the patient characteristics, the specificities of their diseases, the properties of drug candidates. And thus, I think it is really supporting and fostering the current trend towards precision medicine. And specifically in our hands, what we're trying to do is to perform comprehensive molecular profiling of patients, to try to understand the complexity, the heterogeneity of their diseases, again, in our case, most particularly autoimmune diseases. And then we stratify patients into fairly homogeneous subgroups on the basis of their biological and clinical characteristics. And from this, in fact, we perform specific computational analyses to identify therapeutic targets which are predicted to be very important in the pathophysiology, in the causality of the disease. And of course, from this, we can make then inferences in terms of candidate therapeutic targets and additional inferences with respect to drugs of interest. So altogether, I would say what AI is doing for us is capturing the value of big data in the form of predictive models, which are very, very useful to educate decisions to be taken all along the, I would say, the process of drug development. Most particularly selecting with a good confidence the therapeutic target and the drug candidate.
That's really interesting. Thanks for that perspective, Philippe. Rohit, you're also working on using AI in drug discovery. What is the impact that you're seeing, and how are you leveraging various AI techniques?
Yeah, great question, Faisal. I was reading the recent news about in silico medicine, and that was very interesting, to me, particularly from the aspects of, multifold savings, both in time and money that they have been able to achieve, on the pulmonary fibrosis, molecules targeting that. So if you look at the numbers, what I read was that they were able to discover, from the entire cycle, crunch it down to about 18 months, spend about $1.8 million for IP specifically, and another $800,000 for other fibrotic, diseases, altogether less than $3 million. And they were able to come up with 80 molecules in this time frame, and then they were able to narrow it down further. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. So this is one, example that I really liked, and the recent news is that they did get funding of close to, I think, almost $400 million. So there's big amounts of money going in this direction. Results are being proven. And the other statistic that I would like to share with the group is that what I read is that in 2020, $14 billion has gone into AI companies which are doing drug discovery startups. And this is fourfold increase from what it was in 2019. And that is definitely, leading me to think that there is going to be an explosion of innovation in this space.
Thanks, Rohit. That actually leads me to build on that question with a slightly provocative one. All the big pharma companies are obviously using AI for drug development. As you alluded to, there's a large amount of money in the startup system now. There's been a couple of companies that have actually gone public in the last year or so using AI for drug development. And there's a lot more that have had VC funding come through. If you just Google, a lot of them will come up. But we haven't seen many truly in silico drug discovered assets come out into the clinical space and actually get approved and launch it and get regulatory approval. That hasn't happened as much yet. Is that just because we're early in the life cycle, or there are perhaps other challenges that have prevented that from occurring? So maybe a slightly provocative build there. Would be curious to hear if anyone has some thoughts on that front.
Well, I think, AI has been in support of drug development or drug discovery only recently. And in fact, it's really at the level of drug discovery that the impact has been felt yet. That is reducing the time needed to bring a drug candidate to phase 1 clinical evaluation, which is roughly 5 to 7 years, to say something like 1 or 2 years. And so we start to see that. But I think you're right. We have not seen yet an impact in terms of, I would say, enhancing or increasing the number of molecules being registered. But it's going to come down the line. I mean, I think the pipeline is, is going to be full, as Rohit said. I think we're going to see a lot of truly innovative drugs, which are going to be properly targeted to the needs of the patients and their diseases. And I think, the future is going to demonstrate that, we will see more drugs being made available to the patients in the forthcoming, say, 5 years from now.
Well, and is there something unique about our industry that affects the timeline of adoption, perhaps? And as someone who works across multiple industries, do you see something unique to the pharma and life sciences space, or is this common in other verticals as well?
Sir,
Yeah, good.
sorry, was that question to me, Faisal?
Yes, Ed, go ahead.
Yeah. So it is somewhat unique, right? The drug development cycle, right, is very long, right? I actually, found that, the experimental drugs, right, take on average of 12 years to get to market and have an average cost of $2 billion, right? So that's a massive, between discovery and development, that's a massive endeavor, right? To do that. We work in manufacturing. It certainly doesn't also is a big user of our technology. It takes a long time for certain things, right? Depending on whether you're talking about a small product or an airplane, right? In the manufacturing industry, complex manufacturing versus simple manufacturing, but it certainly the process in drug discovery and development is ripe for opportunity because of the amount of time and effort it takes, right? And so any technology that can be applied that helps streamline processes and reduce time to market is critical, right? And so, we focus on helping customers in life science, in all industries, but in life sciences in particular, right? Curate the content available to them, right? And if they curate the content, if they have an AI-driven engine that helps them curate and access that content, right, then they can get results, they can get benefits, and those benefits include everything from, right, better intelligence used in pharmacovigilance programs, right, to patent analytics, productivity gains for faster inquiry response times, right, and even softer things like higher job satisfaction, right, across their community of knowledge workers. And those, while those are sometimes a little more difficult to quantify, they're all critical ways or benefits that result from AI-driven information exchange. And all these benefits have been amplified, right, as all of your employees at your companies, right, are moving to hybrid digital workspaces, right? They have to have that information at their fingertips to continue to accelerate their ability to deliver along this cycle. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely, and great insights. Thank you. Well, so let's start to move on from the early stage discovery space deeper into the drug development life cycle. And our next question is really around that. As we go beyond drug discovery, how is AI being leveraged to enhance other aspects of pharmaceutical and biotech operations, whether it's clinical trials, patient engagement, compliance, et cetera? My personal intuition actually is there's a lot more here that's already out in production in some of these areas. A lot of the low-level fruit has already been mined, and there's a lot more examples here. Tatiana, I know you've done some work in this space. Would you like to share some of the examples you're familiar with?
Absolutely. So on the development side, there's a tremendous work that has been done already in the industry with respect to clinical trial virtualization and decentralization, in-home or at-home monitoring, and measuring of the endpoints. That's actually proved to be on par with the in certain aspects for select disease areas, with the measurements that are taken within the facility, which is amazing. But what I would like to maybe talk more about is the area of the patient engagement. If we think about the current patient or the way that our industry engages with patients versus how other industries treat consumers, their end users, it's day and night, right? So, you look at the customer satisfaction with retail or e-commerce or even, food delivery, restaurants. That compared to pharma is just, there is so much difference. I personally have not heard anyone who has interacted or has been on a high margin or high price drug said something like, "Oh, I'm so happy with the way the company X has treated me." Like, no, most people don't think that they have a relationship with a pharmaceutical company. And so, but their life depends on it. And so how can we as an industry change and revolutionize the way that we engage with patients? And in my mind, the answer is, besides empathy, besides really, really well executed operations, which I know most of pharmaceutical companies already have in place, is really AI and data analytics. Because if you think about it, there are so many different reasons for why patients don't start or don't stay on therapy. A lot of it is financial, but there are many others, like health conditions, comorbidities, health literacy, whether or not the person has a caregiver, what kind of network they belong to, what kind of physician is treating them, what is their specialty, are they familiar with the drug, what kind of context the patients live in, are they too far from the pharmacy and they can't pick up the refill every time it's been dispensed, or do they maybe have difficulty get out of the house in the case of neurological diseases, for example? Do they have, are they restricted in their mobility? What is their interaction with their friends, their network? Does that have influence over whether they decide to get on the drug or stay on the drug? Or do they get influenced by their other patients who, or their friends who say certain things about the product? So there's so many ways we can learn. And again, kind of going back to what I said before, which is a lot of interactions of the consumers are now online, which means we can track them. And so we can use this data to personalize the way we engage with the consumers and really stop treating patients as sick people, because their disease always is in the context of their life, and try and learn through the data about their life as a whole. And we can do that, and we are already doing it. There are lots of great companies that have consumer data, the social determinants of health, as well as the clinical and healthcare data that can be linked at the very granular level. And AI helps us identify the areas, the biggest barriers for onboarding and adherence, and therefore help recommend the best strategies to address very specific micro cohorts of patients in order for us to be able to help them either through marketing channels or through patient support channels. And I really do think that this area it's very hard to implement. Actually, AI is not even the hardest aspect of this. You really need to implement personalization at the operational level at scale, which is oftentimes very hard because you're dealing with, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of patients. It's not easy, but it's a complicated problem, not a complex problem, meaning that there are a lot of steps, but conceptually we can figure out how to do them. It just takes time and effort. But I think this is one of the biggest areas of progress that our industry as a whole has made really during COVID, because we just didn't have any other way of dealing with it and engaging with patients. And I think that area has been the area where we've done a lot of progress on the, from the consumer and consumer engagement side.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on one area, especially around patient engagement. We're also using AI in many other areas. I think someone was trying to jump in. Did someone want to share a thought about other areas in development where AI is being leveraged?
Yeah, I could chime in with one, Faisal, on that. Something which I've done a bit of research on is around, where pharmaceutical companies have a touch point with patients a lot as in clinical trials. And it could be life-saving for some patients to have early access to clinical trials. And as all of us know, there are hundreds of thousands of clinical trials which are going on at any given point in time. I think in excess of 300,000 clinical trials. And I think the challenge area which needs applications of AI for solutions is around enrolling patients into clinical trials. As we all know, we fall short, substantially short in enrolling patients into clinical trials. And one of the core reasons, which I think is, the data is siloed. The patient information is inside of medical record systems, all of them are different, even from the same company in the same hospital system. It's a different, each is a unique implementation. So if there is an overarching AI solution which can look into the records of the patients, and it's a simple equation. It's eligibility criteria, which is inclusion and exclusion. So there's an algorithm to be written which matches patients to clinical trials and make it so much faster to find those patients. So I think there is at least one company that I know that is doing very well in Europe. I do not know if there is any leader in this space in the US, but I think it is an area which is ripe for disruption, especially if the data, even metadata or anonymized data, can be aggregated at some level to be able to say that, okay, this hospital system in Houston has the maximum number of patients potentially suited for this clinical trial. So let's go to this hospital system and partner with them and get the maximum number of patients that we can. And there, AI definitely comes into play, including all the unstructured data, which Tatiana was talking about with natural language processing, which Ed has the solution for. So there's a lot of dots to be connected here, I think.
That's a really good perspective. And there's so many different areas that I've seen in my own personal experience where in drug development, AI is being used. We've already talked about patient engagement. We've talked about sites to a certain extent, but let's continue down the operational side of clinical trials, right? Not just site selection, patient recruitment and enrollment monitoring. There's a lot also going on in non-invasive diagnostics, image analysis, the use of MRI, CT scans, X-rays in the COVID era, et cetera, chest X-rays, things like that. And then if we go beyond drug development, I know there's work being done in, say, manufacturing, looking at quality control processes, and then the whole sales and marketing domain, identifying the right patients who may benefit from a product, the physicians who are likely to subscribe, et cetera. So there's just so many rich areas to mine that AI is being used. There's hardly an area of drug development or in the pharmaceutical industry where AI is not touching what's going on, which is the reason I made my earlier comment of it's almost a question, asking whether or not it's worth it is a question that we're already far beyond. But Rohit, you've started to touch on something that I think is really interesting. As we look at the use of AI through discovery, development, and throughout that whole process, it's not easy. We run into problems. We run into challenges. So that's a good lead into our next question, which is, what are some of the challenges that prevent AI from delivering further value? And thinking about it from specific examples again. Excuse me again, Rohit, you did a great job about the data being siloed, but I'm sure there's many others. Philippe, what are your thoughts? What's preventing us from realizing the value of AI?
Well, I think to me, I would mention perhaps two challenges. The first one is, I would say, access to the proper quantity and quality of data. I think this is really very, very important, obviously, because if you derive models from inappropriate data, then you go nowhere. And I think it has very significant implications for the health industry in implementing proper, I would say, governance and creation of the data, and obviously, we have to take into account, emerging regulations. We have in Europe GDPR. We are very sensitive about using, personal health data. And using, sharing, storing those data. So that's really one part. The other part is, I would say, is the regulatory acceptance, because of course the field is emerging, and we're trying to generate some evidence, making some inferences from computer models. And of course, the question for the health industry is how much proof of evidence will, I would say, the regulators allocate to those models and the conclusions we make out of that. So I think it's very, very important if we want to capture at the end of the day the value of AI, that we're not in a situation where, in fact, we cannot replace some of the steps we currently do to develop a drug by some, I would say, inferences made from predictive models, computer models. And thus, I think there is a steep learning curve for both the industry, but also for the regulators to be comfortable with conclusions we make out of models, which will, I would say, make the work in the labs and in clinical studies lighter, faster, and simpler. And I think this part about a dialogue to engage with the regulators and us as part of the industry is, I think, very, very critical.
I would also add to what Philippe mentioned, the deployment challenge. I think one of the things that we've been doing for the last 2-3 years or so has been to get the data, clean the data, link it, and then run AI on it. But the question now is, as we scale, what happens to industrialization of AI? Do you have the right environment to run your models in parallel and in large quantities at the same time? How do you incorporate the feedback loop back into those models in real time as you deploy your models and act on them? I don't think we've spent enough time implementing and deploying the models to figure out what that perfect MLOps infrastructure should look like. And I also find that it's always hard to find talent, but especially hard to find the right talent in data science. But I also find that there is a huge need now for ML engineers to maintain those that orchestration of AI algorithms and making sure that they pass the quality checks and the performance checks concurrently. And so it's especially important on the clinical side of things, because if you serve the wrong ad to the wrong person, it may not be as critical as if you recommend a dosage or push the recommendation to the auto injector for the wrong dosage of a dispensed drug. And so that's that has been, I would say, one of the biggest challenges this year, at least for us, to figure out how do you manage industrialization of AI and ML.
Lots of great discussion about some of the challenges. We talked about data as well as regulatory and productionalization and ML ops. One comment you made, Tatiana, really resonated with me, which is around people. It's a challenge that perhaps we don't talk about as much, finding the right talent, the right pool of folks to work on these problems in our industry. I don't know if you guys have shared these experiences, but sometimes I've had challenges of attracting people because they might be getting job offers that they want to take at large tech companies, for instance. Is this something you folks have struggled with? Has this been a challenge for you, just finding good AI folks to do AI?
So I can chime in there, Faisal, because we play in this space, right? So a lot of our clients come to us when they're looking for a talent pipeline. And the economy is super hot, red hot right now. And as you said, there is a lot of play from the very, very well-funded, deep-pocketed, tech players in the space. So I think data science and data engineering, ML ops, machine learning talent is a good talent is going to be increasingly difficult to find. So companies would probably have to cultivate and nurture, and maybe even repurpose some of their talented folks and have them interested in the space. The good thing is that I'm seeing is that my niece goes to Wellesley, and even though she's taking a track into the mid space side of things, she's taking a program on Python and mobile apps. So there's all the younger kids are definitely very, very interested in this space. And we are in fact partnering with MIT as well. They have a capstone program. So for one of our ventures, which is around predictive analytics for predicting lung cancer in COPD patients, we are going to be leveraging, a talent pool from MIT. But I think it is going to be increasingly tough. But what might work in the favor, and I'll pause with that last comment, is that we are increasingly becoming global in our approach, especially with COVID-19. Everyone's working remotely. People surveyed do not want to come back to offices, right? You're just more productive and efficient working from the home offices. And then of course you need the team interaction as well. But now you can access talent globally. So maybe if you can't find, a data scientist in, let's say, US, you might be able to find them in India, China, Brazil, or some other place. So
Great perspective. Thank you. Just in case my boss is watching, I won't comment on the whole returning back to the office discussion. But I think we've had a really good discussion so far on the current state of AI, what's possible, how we're adding value, and what are some of the challenges that we face. Just in the last part of our panel today, let's take a little peek forward and look into the future. And in our last question, how do we expect AI to be adopted moving forward in our industry? What do we expect will be the cutting edge, and what will be the new areas of AI impacting the life sciences? Maybe let's do a quick round amongst all of us. Just one or two thoughts from all of you as to what might be the future of AI in the life sciences. Ed, do you want to get us going?
Sure. Sorry, had you on mute. So my thought, what's the saying? You overestimate in 5 years and you underestimate in 10 years, right? So my response is going to be a little more pragmatic, which is AI is just going to continue to be applied, right, to increase automation and scale, right? And that'll impact workflows and manual labor requirements for processing the vast quantities of multi-structured data, right? Because you can't have a good AI program unless you have well-curated information that leverages both structured and unstructured data, right? And so I believe we'll just continue to see that amount of information running through solutions like the one we offer, and that the companies like ours, which we spend a lot of time on product roadmap, right, to make ongoing advancements to those systems related to AI, because it's part of our value proposition, right, will continue to help make employees more productive and innovative. And an example of that, right, would be, you've probably all had some engagement to some degree with chatbots, right, or virtual assistants, whether you use them in your company to support your knowledge workers, or, you went on to your utility company's website and you wanted to use the chatbot to help you work through a customer service issue. You've all had experience with that, right? There's a lot of room for improvement in that technology, right? And that technology has to be more conversational, has to be more user-friendly. And that means improving the intelligence, right? Giving it context to go from being reactive to predictive. And so we see chatbots, right, as an example of the next evolution of AI. And as you see those, get better and can be applied within your enterprise to help you do things like go from searching for information to information discovering you as a user, you'll start to realize where AI is really, taking hold. And then the last thing I'll say on this, looking a little bit into the future, is the other area we see where there's going to be an integration of what are currently sort of discrete activities or systems is the integration of AI-driven intelligent search engines and collaboration systems. So for example, Zoom is a collaboration system. Microsoft Teams is a collaboration system. You use that to interact with the people in your company. You're going to start to see the integration of those two things, right? Where we call it collaborating with intelligence, right? Having intelligence is and your ability to your employees to be more productive is going to be key with that. So those are the areas I think that we'll see a lot of progress on in the next 5 years.
Great vision of the future painted there, Ed. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to when the chatbots will be, the Turing test will be obsolete, and we have to come up with a better way to assess chatbots. Sorry, inside AI joke there. Rohit, what do you think about what the future of AI in the life sciences holds?
So I think the future is very bright. First of all, I think we'll definitely get to a place where we will be able to solve for a lot of diseases, kind of preempt even. Where I would like to give the example of something real and tangible is what Google has done with DeepMind on the AlphaFold. So I don't know if all of us have followed that, but it is amazing that they have been able to learn from whatever 200,000, 300,000 examples and able to publish, I think, north of close to $350,000 or in that 350,000 protein structures, which is amazing. And they are intending to go to several millions of that. And all of it is publicly available. So I think that is definitely one sense of direction, that a lot of such great research is going to be available at no charge to a lot of people who want to build on top of that. And then the other thing which I follow closely, because my background is engineering, and I'm sometimes kind of attracted to physics, is about quantum computing. So I think it's early days, but who knows, in the next 5 years we'll have a small quantum computer running in the cloud doing a lot of stuff, crunching time from 10 years maybe to 1 day, right? So those are the two comments I have, Faisal.
Thanks. I got to say, I'll take a risk, but probably many of us in the AI space have an attraction to physics. Might have been how some of us even got into the field. I have the unfortunate job of wrapping the discussion up because we've just had such a fascinating conversation. I feel like we could keep going for a long time. But we are coming close to our time, and this has been such an enriching and rich conversation. I'd like to thank the panel. We've talked about everything from the promise and the potential of AI in the pharmaceutical life sciences, through the uses of AI in drug discovery and drug development, some of the challenges we face, as well as what the future holds. So thank you, everybody. Lots of great perspectives that were shared. And at this point, we'll look towards wrapping up this fantastic panel. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you all. This has been amazing. Thank you to each and every one of our panelists, and a very special thank you to Faisal for moderating and keeping us on track. That was amazing, and I know this virtual audience is going wild with virtual applause. Thank you again for your time today. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.